Hello and welcome everybody to Sustainable House Day, the final session in room A. So the topic is Passive House and the MC for this session will be Kylie Mills. We've got a great lineup of panellists to present and answer questions. Sustainable House Day, this event's been going on since about the turn of the century. It's run by Renew, so we're a not-for-profit membership-based organisation. We've got branches around Australia. We've got a bunch of events that we run, such as this, and Speed Data Sustainable Expert. We have two magazines that we publish, that's Renew and Sanctuary magazines. We provide expert independent advice and advocate for consumers in the energy and housing markets. So I'd like to pass over to Kylie Mills.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone's been enjoying the day so far. There's been some excellent content. I am a registered architect in New South Wales, and I am also on the board of the Australian Passive House Association presently, so that's really exciting, and it's really exciting to be part of this session this afternoon, so thank you. We have some really exciting projects to look at as well. So we have a certified passive house, so that's Abbott House by Jason Edmiston. He will be looking at that this afternoon. We've got the Blanchard House with Clive Blanchard. We have Parkside Passive Perfection with Milton McDonald, and we've then, as we've just seen in the break there, Thornley Passive House with Matthew Kosnik. So we will be taking a look at those projects. So for everybody that's attending, what I'd like you to do is put your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So that's where the questions go. They won't be answered in the chat, so everyone can sort of say hello in the chat. I'd love to see where everyone's from this afternoon. If everyone's sort of come out in the morning and been part of the session all day, we'll have a look at that. That'd be really nice to see how everyone's been doing, particularly if you've been on the since 9:30 this morning, because there's been some great content. All right, shall we move into our first project? So Jason from Abbott House.
Thanks, Kylie. Hi everyone, my name's Jason Edmiston. I work as a contract administrator in the commercial construction industry, and I'm also the owner of Abbott House. The home, as you see it today, is the product of a disenchantment with the local residential construction. I grew up in a home which was really hot in summer and freezing in winter, and I couldn't quite understand how that was possible in the Perth climate. Which in a lot of ways is one of the mildest in the world. As a result, I commenced some research into how the rest of the world lives and came across the Passive House Standard. The core principles of the standard really resonated with me, and I decided that I'd proceed down the garden path and see how far I could take it. So I purchased a 213 square metre block in Scarborough, a suburb on the coast in Perth. And yeah, slowly but surely started to design the house. It started to become evident that high performance seemed to come at the expense of either architectural design or budget. And that was the challenge that I set myself, to produce a home that looked good, performed to a high standard, and was something that I could afford. I threw myself into the project as the project manager and handpicked a number of design and industry professionals to assist. I quite like the mid-century aesthetic, and decided that if we could try and introduce a look that kind of gave achieved that brief, and that was set in the desert, and take advantage of those kind of like water-wise advantages, as well as a really cool interior palette. I chose to construct a home using timber frame, which is fairly conventional nationally. But what we did is we kind of I suppose we introduced what was introduced passive house performance into that timber frame design, and really struck a good balance of performance and cost in doing so. As you see, it's a pleasure to live in. It's extremely comfortable. Like, I don't have any hay fever since I've lived in the home, and there's a few other advantages there that have really kind of been quite amazing, coming from a standard Perth home into living in something like this. And yeah, I'm certainly not looking to move in a hurry. It's something that I quite enjoy living in, and I'm not sure how I'll ever move. So yeah,
that's fantastic, Jason. Yeah, hay fever. Yes, this time of year, it'd be nice relief.
Yeah. Right.
Clive, from talking about the Blanchard house. So let's hear from you.
Our house was built shortly after the First World War. It had a kitchen and bathroom that no longer met our needs. Although we considered moving, we decided we would rather renovate and preserve the character of the existing building. We wanted a home that was functionally better, that met most of our needs for the next 20 years. And since we needed to completely change the layout of the rear to achieve that, we decided that it wasn't going to cost us a lot extra to make a low energy house. When I read about the Passive House Standard, I decided that it made a lot of sense, particularly given that winter heating is actually dominates energy use, even in most of Southern Australia. So I used version 8 of the Passive House Planning Package, as that at the time I started to design was the latest package. I didn't follow all of the common practices because I wanted to, for example, use an Australian-made heat recovery ventilator rather than a certified European-made one. The performance of the Australian-made one's not as good. However, because we've not got minus 15 degrees outside, I figured that that wasn't quite as important. And the planning package has got the opportunity to allow you to put in the actual performance, which I did. So it reflects the fact that it doesn't perform as well. I previously installed an active trom wall, which is basically a solar air heater, and incorporated that into the ventilation system. So we've actually got what in air conditioning terms is called an economy cycle. We've got the trom wall, and we've got the heat recovery ventilator.
What a fantastic mix of things you've got there happening, Clive. Thank you. And next we have Milton McDonald with Part-Time Passive Perfection, joined also today Brian, I pronounce your name correctly, Guinan? I hope I got that right. Guinan. Damn, I tried. All right, also to join you. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Kylie. Our home is built in a new subdivision just in a West Perth, so towards the beach. We have less than 400 square metres of land, and as you can see from the pictures there, it's quite a dense sort of a subdivision. The streets have got quite large houses on smaller blocks, and the zoning kind of required a bigger house than we actually need as such. So we decided in terms of design to go for a 4-bedroom family home, and then at the back, which you can't see, the middle bottom picture is like a granny flat above the garages. So it's actually a 2-bedroom apartment up there, making it more versatile than just building a straight family home. We discovered the builder that we used, iSmart Building Group, and this is what they do. They do the passive house system, which, to be frank, I had never heard of before. We knew about solar passive, but not this. and so we kept as far as possible to the standard fit out and well, the standard construction that the builder was using, which is a framed house, well insulated, double glazed windows, and so on. And so there it goes. Probably because there's only 2 of us living in the house most of the time, we probably don't get all of the benefits that you would expect from the house. Our power bills are quite low, but things like incidental heating from appliances and bodies in the house are less than they would be, of course, if we had 5 or 6 people here. Yeah, so we're thrilled to bits with the product and happy to share today.
Fantastic. Do you want to add to that, Brian?
I'll go a little bit. Just for history, my name is Brian. I'm part of iSmart Building Group. I owner and registered builder. We only build passive houses here in Western Australia. We've probably built about 35 to 37 at the moment. Not all of them certified. We have a few certified. We've got a few going on at the moment, and we've got another few in planning. But predominantly they're uncertified, built to passive house principles. Milton's particular home has 2 different air results, air tightness test results. Tested by myself. I'm an ATMA tester. The main house is a 0.72 and the ancillary dwelling is a 0.78. So considering that it's not a certified passive house, it's extremely high performance. We all know that 0.6 is certified passive. There's 24.6 cubic meters of structural timber in his house, which takes about 95 seconds to grow in Western Australian forestry. So it's a holistic approach for us when we're talking about passive house. It's all about carbon footprint, life cycle analysis. We've got to consider all of these things when we're talking about passive house. So 90% reduction in heating and cooling is one part of the puzzle, but as everybody knows, when you build passive, it's not just about that.
Correct. Wow, that was speedy. All right, thank you, Brian. Now we'll move on to hear from Matthew Kosnik about the Thornley Passive House.
Thanks. So I'm Matthew. I'm representing my partner Catherine and 2 school-age children today. So we're the owners of Thornley Passive House. They've been living here about a year now, but we didn't originally set out to build a certified passive house. We set out to build a comfortable and energy efficient home. And that was originally designed largely on sort of passive solar lines. We ended up building a passive house, although I had asked our architect at Envirotecture to actually run the spreadsheet because I was very interested in the decisions that we made and how that would affect the house performance. But we ended up building a passive house because of our proximity to the train line and requirements from the council that we meet noise abatement requirements due to our closeness to the train line. So that meant we either had to spend a lot of money on acoustically certified windows, or we could get passive house windows, which were actually cheaper. We needed ducted ventilation, and running ducts for an air conditioning system or a heat recovery system, it's going to cost you the same. So we spend a bit more money on a heat recovery system, but then we'll save that very, very quickly because of the low cost of operation. So we've lived in the house about a year now. We're amazingly comfortable, amazingly happy. And I guess one of the things I would say about living in a passive house from a sustainability perspective is that it isn't any different than living in any other ordinary house. There's nothing extra you have to do. You just live here. And for the most part, things just take care of themselves. We have a great big tree in the middle of our yard. So it is part of the reason why the house was designed the way it is. But despite the fact we've got that great big tree, we're on track to produce about as much power as we consume on an annual basis. So as I said in the video, we might have been Sydney's first passive house, but there are several other now, and there'll be hopefully a bunch more coming online. And certainly Catherine and I hope that passive houses become quite a routine thing, because it's a great way to build to what is effectively an energy specification that would enable very effective zero net energy use houses that are incredibly healthy to live in with really nice filtered air and everything else. So, thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew. We have a lot of questions coming in right now. So we'll open it up to the panelists to answer. And what we've got here, what we might start with WA and direct the questions. We've got a couple out that way, so it'd be nice to hear from you. What are the relative merits of ducted versus non-ducted ventilation systems? So how about we go with, I'm trying to think now. Who's best? Who would like to have a go at that one? So ducted versus non-ducted ventilation systems.
So are we talking about centralized and decentralized?
I'd say yes.
Okay, so if everyone's happy, I'll give it a crack if you want.
And then we'll see what Matthew says, yeah.
Yeah, Jason, you feel to jump in whenever you want, mate. So centralized and decentralized. Centralized is a unit that's in one location in the house, and you've got small ducts, depending on the unit, depending on the system. The small ducts run in either bulkheads or ceiling voids, wall voids, wherever they go, and they deliver to the family areas or the living areas, bedrooms, living, dining room, and then the extraction comes back from your wet areas, your bathroom, laundry, etc. That's a centralized system. So that goes back to distribution boxes, so you don't get noise transfer between room to room. Then decentralized are an individual unit, which they usually come in pairs. There'll be one at one end of the house if we're talking about an apartment or something like that, because that's generally when they're used, either that or granny flat area, and it's for cost purposes really. But one will go on one side of the room, the other one will go on the other side of the room, and generally they're on an 80-second timer. So they will push air in on one, push air out on the other, and then they will alternate over and back every 80 seconds, depending on what van mode they're on and what the frequency is on how much they travel. The difference between both, the decentralized will probably not work nearly as well as a centralized unit. Decentralized are usually for smaller areas. So when we talk about smaller areas, we're always talking about volume when we talk about the heat recovery ventilation or ventilation. So once you get to a certain volume, you'll go to a unit automatically, because the price will become, it won't be cost effective to put more decentralized and more decentralized and more decentralized. So it really depends on what you're building, on what system you will use, but generally a house will use centralized, apartments, granny flats will use decentralized.
Matthew, do you want to jump in there?
I guess I was going to comment that in a lot of discussions with people, there has been confusion. I'm not sure this is what the question was, with regards to, say, a typical split system that you would see in a normal house, which is just cooling down the air, but just recirculating the air within the house. Because in a passive house, the air tightness is quite high. You want to make sure you get fresh air in from outside. So the HRVs are actually continually replacing fresh air in from outside. So I guess that was going to be my comment.
Excellent, which is a really nice segue into our next question, because does the HRV system work only in a passive house home, as in airtight and extensive insulation, or also existing houses, so that the performance isn't quite so, where the performance isn't quite so good. So they're trying to renovate it. I think that's the question, is does it only work in a passive house, or can we put it in a standard house without it being airtight? Any comments from anybody there? Yeah, go Clive. You're on mute. We can't hear you. We still can't hear. There you go, Clive.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what happened there. Sorry. Now I've got forgotten what we were talking about.
Does a HRV only work in a passive house home?
So the reason for having an HRV is if you're having active ventilation, so bringing outside air into the house. So if you're not going to be bringing outside air into the house, then, and most conventional air conditioning systems don't do that, then you don't have an HRV. The thing with a passive house is the target is to have a very low air leakage rate. The problem with a very low air leakage rate is if you don't do something about the concentration of toxins in the air, then you're going to have health problems, moisture problems, that sort of thing. So if you're going for the very low air leakage, it's essential to have a heat recovery ventilator so that you can have sufficient fresh outside air to maintain the air quality in the building.
Further to that, Clive, if I may, when the person asks, can you put it in an existing house? Yes, you can. Of course you can. But you got to consider the efficiency of what you're doing. So if you have a house that's not airtight, so let's assume that somebody wants to put this into an existing house and they want to put it in, it's going to bring in fresh air, but the efficiency of the unit will be drastically reduced. So if the efficiency rate of a unit, and most units now are 90% plus, if you have a house that's drawing in hot air from everywhere else or cold air from everywhere else because it's a leaky building, then obviously the efficiency of that unit drastically reduces because it's not an airtight home. So while you get fresh air in, you will still need that large air conditioning system to temper the house. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. All right. Now, we have a glazing question. It says, with Passive House, it seems like a careful balancing act in terms of glazing is required due to costs and heat loss. How do we find the sweet spot for your project? So, Milton, how was yours found?
Sweet spot. Because there are so many features in the Passive House system, orientation, airtight, insulation, double glazing, you know, the whole bit, it's hard to say which part of it is actually producing the result. And I think probably correct orientation is you know, of windows is the crucial factor to start off with. Do that if you do nothing else, and then the others will add to the efficiency of the house. But I think that's probably the main thing. And if you had properly shaded windows in summer, in our mild climate, you could probably, you know, if you had to, you could probably get away without the double glazing. But then double glazing gives you other benefits as well. You know, like was it Matthew was saying about sound insulation. We've got two sources of a lot of noise at our place. Across the road here, there's a building site of a block of apartments, and the other way, we've got the state netball centre. So you can imagine what that sounds like on a Friday and Saturday every week. And we don't hear a thing. So there are other benefits to factor in as well as just temperature, of course, and that's part of lifestyle quality.
That sounds great. Matthew, you're near is it a freight line or a rail line as well?
So we're on the main line between Sydney and everything north. So every freight train on the east coast of Australia will go by our house, and we get commuter trains going by about every 7 minutes during the commuting period. So we get a lot of train noise. I can tell you, because the council made us do it, that our sound standard in our bedroom, which is the one closest to the train line, is below the 35 decibels required of residential bedrooms, right?
That's
so
fantastic.
The guy who did the sound test was amazed, because he's like, but these aren't acoustically dampened. It's not acoustically dampened glass. And I'm like, but it's triple glaze, Passive House, sealed windows. And it's amazing. Works great.
Do you think the walls contributed to that as well, being a Passive House?
100%. So you've got really good wall insulation, and it's gapless, right? That's one of the key principles of Passive House, is that you get a complete insulation layer, and it's all sealed and taped. And, you know, we've got a, you know, less than 0.4 air changes per hour at 50 PA. So it's a very tight house. And so, yeah, we don't get much noise in, which is great.
If I could jump in on this one as well, Kylie, just quickly.
Sure.
I think the biggest thing to bear in mind with this standard is that everything is modelled using software, and that you are able to really fine tune the building and the specifications of the building to achieve the performance that you're seeking. It's not, there's no guesswork involved in where you put windows and how big those windows are. Yes, you design them to, or you design your home to kind of achieve the fundamentals of good design, and you know, and you can incorporate passive solar design principles into that. But when you actually input all the data into the modeling software, it tells you how the home will perform, and you can tweak it from there and make those changes to suit what you're actually after and how much you want to spend. So,
and I think that's important, because what you've just said there is that every house that's a certified passive house has been modelled using the passive house planning package, and that's something most people just don't realise, that it can be fine-tuned. And each wall system is different. So there's a number of questions about different types of wall systems and things like that. So I would probably, if there's, and I know there's a couple of people out there in the chat land, they might be able to pop in a few links there to the various things that are on the Australian Passive House Association's website, as far as books able to be purchased and read about, and links for various different types of things there. That would be fantastic. One question which has been just touched on, and I think Clive and Matthew did actually mention on it, is if passive house and passive solar, are they mutually exclusive? I think we've all got an opinion there, and everyone's shaking their heads. That's awesome. No, they're not.
Definitely they're not. Passive house takes traditional passive solar design and takes it to a higher level. As Jason was saying, you do an analysis and the software gives you immediate feedback. So if I change that from double to triple glazed window, what's the impact on the overall performance? If I increase the insulation from 100 millimeters to 125 millimeters, what's that going to do? So as I think, I can't remember, it was Milton or Matthew said, you've got to start with proper orientation anyway. It's not impossible, but it's going to be a lot harder to achieve good passive house, to achieve passive house certification if you start with poor orientation.
That is 100% correct. And I've heard somebody actually mention that passive house is passive solar on steroids as an option, which I thought was a fair enough sort of comment. All right, so we've got a couple of other questions in here about per square metre. What should somebody be planning for in terms of cost, roughly? Milton, you've just gone to mute accidentally.
Yes, okay. Your cost per square metre is going to depend a lot on how you fit the house out, as well as its construction. Overall, I think ours came in probably similar to some of the higher level of project builders around Perth, so per square metre. Brian would know probably more of that comparison than I, but I've seen some others around, like we've got a couple of display homes like that quite close to us here, and their cost would be similar or more than ours, and they've got less house. So it's actually still quite an effective way of building. In our case, it's a fully framed house, with the frame being built in the factory. So that reduces wastage, of course, and provides an opportunity to, basically the frame arrived on site and it was up at the end of the day. So all of the walls for a two-storey house. So that kind of construction can contain your costs. Now, if you wanted to do the same thing and put, say, face brick around it instead of hardy sheets, then that's going to cost more. So yeah, there's a lot of variables to a question like that.
There are.
I'll jump in if you want.
Yeah, sure.
So like I said, we've built 35 to 37 homes, but new single story, two-story renovations, additions, the whole yards. At the moment, we're sitting at, for a certified passive house, single story, we usually build them in about 4.5 to 5 months. They're about $2,300 a square meter, 22 to $2,300 a square meter. Now, that's because we've been doing it so long. We've got some good suppliers, etc. I'm being told by everybody in the industry that that's too cheap, right? So it can be done. Our aim is not to make money. Our aim is to get the product out there and to show people that Passive House doesn't need to be exclusive. This is physics. Physics are numbers, and numbers don't lie. Passive House allows us to use those numbers. All we have to do is to find the materials and the trades to put this system together to make it work for our climate and our availability of what we've got at hand in our current locations. So Jason over at Abba House might not build the same as me, but he might have different suppliers. So he might be able to get products different than me, and he might be able to build the same cost as me. Similar to Matthew, he might build different. Clive might build different. Everybody builds according to what they have available locally. With Passive House, as long as we incorporate all those 5 Passive House principles, then we get the desired result.
And don't forget that you're talking West Coast versus East Coast of Australia too. There is a industry price difference we have to be aware of as well. And I know that being in Sydney, there's a huge difference in that balance of costs as well.
Yeah,
right.
We have a big uphill struggle with brick house though. We have, like, we're at the moment, we're 11% of the industry in timber frame. The rest is all brick. So we have challenges in opposite ways too.
Oh, definitely.
There's just quickly, there's also a difference in climates within Australia as well, which is, we obviously need to take into account. You know, you're not going to build the same type home in the southwest of Western Australia as you are up in Cairns or Darwin. You're going to have to model the house the same way as the rest of the country, but you're going to be using different materials, different thicknesses of insulation, different materiality, and that to achieve the same result in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite a lot of questions, I have to admit. There's 35 of them. I'm just going to sort of pick out a couple that are sort of general. We've got some about blower door testing results. So we heard earlier from, it was Brian that mentioned the, was it Milton's air changes, so 0.72 and 0.78 for the 2 different portions of the house. That's from memory.
Yes.
How did the others perform? So Clive, Jason?
We haven't finished doing the ceiling in the original part of the house, so I haven't bothered to do a blower door test because I know it would fail. So I've got to do that. In the new part, I think it is actually fairly tight, but I haven't tested it.
No problem. Jason?
We achieved just under the 0.6, we're at 0.55. To be honest, it was always, it was kind of something that we were never originally aiming for to have the house certified. It was really just taking advantage of the principles of Passive House and taking it as far as we can. I think it got to the point where myself and the builder were just putting so much effort in. We're like, we just need to try and get this thing over the line. But I think in comparison to a traditional home in Australia, if you're talking around the 1 air changes per hour under a pressure of 50 pascals when you do your blower door test, you are so much tighter than a standard Australian home, and the performance which comes about as a result of that is just night and day. So in terms of we are talking, we might be between 0.6 and 0.7. We are talking about a pinhole in the fabric of the airtight membrane. That's essentially what we're talking about. We're not talking about we've missed a seal under a door. It's very, very fine testing that needs to go on to achieve those kind of results.
And Matthew, how did yours perform?
So we're at 0.35. So we did set out to do, well, from the point at which we were signing the contract, we knew we were going certified. And I guess one comment I would make towards certification is, it cost us, I think, $5,000 or something, which is a tremendously minor line item in any construction budget. But the advantage of a fully certified house is it means that all the great work our architect did is completely independently evaluated by another expert in the field of passive houses and reviews all of that documentation and So you've got another set of eyes going over things. And we did it essentially because it was a really cheap insurance policy. Like it's a really great way to get another set of eyes on your stuff and make sure that everything worked out exactly right.
And I guess the other advantage too would be that not only is your designs all checked, your builder's work is checked as well. So Milton,
100%.
Yeah, Milton, how did you go with that process?
How did we go with the process? We didn't go for certified in the first place anyway, and then when we got the figures, anything under 1 would have been nice, especially when if we'd gone to another builder, we might have had a figure of 12 or 15.
And was there a reason why you didn't go certified?
I think at that stage we were just concerned about the cost. There was a cost premium to do that. In hindsight, maybe we should have done, but yeah, they're the decisions you make along the way.
And Jason, how about you in that situation?
Sorry, in terms of?
Certification.
So I suppose, yeah, as I say, we elected to go down that path purely to, I suppose, more prove a point than anything. But it was, but in hindsight, like I wouldn't have, I don't think that, the air tightness testing side of things is really, was really something that we needed to go as far as we did. But it is so, it is just so much more, so much tighter and so much better built when you are looking at the finer details down to this point. You are what gave me comfort in actually going to this standard to start with was that we can quality test the home. We have targets and quite mathematically driven targets at the start of the job with what we want to achieve. And then when you get to the end of the project and you do actually do all this as-built testing, you're essentially verifying that what the work done at the start has manifested itself in construction, and that what you've paid for, you are actually getting. And I think that's one of the really big draw cards with the standard. It's something that you can actually prove and verify.
So just based on that and going with the HRV, and before you do disappear off that, Jason, no hay fever, does the HRV contribute to that? Is it noisy and is it expensive to run? Okay,
so the hay fever thing. So the biggest thing is that you don't have uncontrolled air coming into the home, and with that uncontrolled air, you're bringing pollen in and all that kind of stuff that sends you that drives you crazy. I haven't seen a tissue box in about a year and a half. So the thing with the HRV, so the HRV actually has filters inside the unit which filter the incoming air. So it's a controlled ventilation. It's controlled air that's coming to the house. It's fresh air. So it's not bringing any contaminants into the house, which can adversely affect your health. In terms of, I think I saw a question there was about noise of the HRV as well. You don't know that it's working really. It just sits in the background and just slowly pushes air through the house and takes the contaminated, humid, smelly air out of the house. There are instances, say for instance, when you're having a shower, there's a switch that you can hit, and that will boost the system and take more of that air out to stop any excess moisture building up. So when you go to the bathroom or you're cooking in the kitchen, you want to get more heat out or more odor out. That's the solution for it. In terms of running costs for the HRV, it literally from what I understand, it draws a similar power has similar power consumption to a light bulb. So it's literally like just a little fan ticking over in there and just cycling that air around, as opposed to having an air conditioning system or a heating system, which is drawing huge amounts of energy and costing an absolute fortune to run.
And I think that's a really good way to sort of go into comparisons of other people's experience and costs for their running of their homes. Clive, how does yours perform as even a work in progress? You're just on mute still.
Yeah, we were paying about $4,000 a year in energy costs, so that was gas and electricity. We are still paying about what is it, $1,100 or something rather dollars a year. Most of that, but there are still things that we can do to reduce energy use. And so I'm expecting that to be halved. At the very least, and I should comment that we run the house at a warmer temperature than is normally recommended, because we're both getting a bit older. When my daughter came around the other day, Stephanie turned the temperature down because she was complaining it was too hot. So, and that in winter contributes to higher energy use. I should say that the biggest single thing about our reduction in energy use is the roof has got good solar access, and so we do generate quite a lot of our own power. But bear in mind, we're in South Australia, which has got the most expensive energy of any of the mainland states.
Thank you. Milton, how are your costs for operation? How comfortable do you feel inside your home?
In terms of costs, the electricity cost is well down. It's becoming a bit of a conversation topic with our neighbours, comparing ours with theirs, because they all see that our house is different to everybody else's. In terms of comfort, it's stayed between 19 and 24 degrees the whole time. So 19 is about the coolest it's been, and that'll be on a morning when it's 8 degrees outside. Now we, like Clive, we like a little bit warmer than that too, because we're not quite as young as some anymore, and so we use the split system air conditioner to warm up the room that we're in. Not that it'll be on for long, you know, be on for 15 or 20 minutes, and then we're turning it off again because it's already warmed up those 2 or 3 extra degrees. Yeah.
And Matthew, how about yourselves? I know you've got the fan going in the background there. Is that purely for comfort because it's a bit warm in Sydney today?
Yeah, it's a bit warm. We're quite comfortable. I don't really have a good, well, I could talk a great deal about exactly what it is. Basically, we use about a ½ kilowatt per degree below 20 degrees to heat our house if we want to keep between that 20 to 25 degree band. And mainly that's a function of if it's sunny out or not, because we're built on passive solar as well as passive house. So if it's sunny out, we don't use any heat. We've had a few rainy weeks where it's rained for an entire week, so the heat ran a bit more, but our electricity bills are pretty negligible. We'll be, zero net producers, zero net consumers across the year. So it's not an issue.
That's fantastic. All right, and I think that brings our session to a close just about, folks. What I would like to say, there's a number of questions that we haven't actually got to. We'll see whether we can get some answers out there. And I'll converse with the Renew fantastic crew who's put all of this together to see how we can best answer some of those. There are more buildings being done in tropical climates, just to sort of let people know that, yes, that's actually happening. I'm doing one myself, so up the north coast of New South Wales, which is great. And I know of several others. So stay tuned if you would like to know more. The Passive House conference in October is on. So there is a number of good things coming out of that. And I know Renew is also putting on another event on the 28th next week about passive houses. So if you'd like to learn more, that'd be fantastic. And I think that was that's it. Thank you so much for your time. And Brian, thank you for your very speedy introduction earlier today as well. And thank you all of your panelists and for sharing your homes with us today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you, Kylie, and all the panelists. That was a great session. So many questions. I think Passive House is a real sort of hot topic at the moment. So this was the last session for today. So just like to say, as wrapping up, thanks to everyone involved, including the volunteers and interns who were doing work behind the scenes. Feel free to check out all of the homes on the Sustainable House Day website with virtual tour videos and all the other goodies that you can find there. Participants will be receiving a survey, so if you could help us assess the event and make it even better for next year, that would be great. And yeah, as mentioned just before, we've got a couple of quite a few sort of deep dive extension sessions, so have a look on the Sustainable House Day website for that as well.